Hey guys, what's up? This is Cody Miller coming at you with yet again another video. Today we're going to be modifying this Game Boy Advance with an AGS-101 screen. To do this, we'll of course need a Game Boy Advance, and we're going to have to look here at the back of it. And inside this little hole where you can see the motherboard, you're going to see the numbers 03. Now if that first number is a 0, then that means that we need the 40-pin connector. But if it's a 1, then that means we need the 32-pin connector. For this mod, I'll be using this kit here. This is sold by the GodOfGaming on eBay. I'll link his seller page down in the description. Basically, for $40, what he gives you is the 2 screwdrivers required to conduct this mod, a prefabbed adapter cable, a new faceplate for the front of the Game Boy Advance, which is of course actually glass, and he gives you an AGS-101 screen. Now this is actually the most desired screen for these swaps. This is the screen that we got on the Game Boy Advance SP Lite, which is the actual LCD with the deeper colors, much like what you see with the Nintendo DS, instead of the very washed out LCD that we deal with on the classic Game Boy Advance and Game Boy Advance SP. So this is a pretty good deal altogether, seeing as you're getting an AGS-101 screen, and if you tried to buy an AGS-101 just to strip the screen from it, then you're going to pay about that price for it anyway, if not more, since the AGS-101 tends to be a little bit more higher demand due to its screen. But in this case, this is a new replacement screen and not a it's not been pulled from a Game Boy Advance. Just remember, whenever you buy from him, you're going to need to ensure that you order the appropriate kit for the appropriate Game Boy. This one in particular is the 40-pin kit, but the 32-pin installation is exactly the same except for one step, and we'll go ahead and go over that anyway. Also, to complete this mod, you're going to need either an X-Acto knife or a Dremel, as well as a soldering iron, and you're either going to need hot glue or some tape. For this case, I'm just going to be using some tape. Alright, so to start, we're going to want to pull the game cartridge out, as well as the batteries. And the next thing we got to do is we got 7 screws we got to pull out. So that's 6 tri-wing and 1 Phillips. Alright, now we can just pull the case off. Alright, so the next thing we're going to do is we're just going to take off these buttons very carefully, as well as the edge bumpers, as well as the switch here. Alright, so now we need to remove the 2 or 3 screws holding the PCB. This particular system has only 2 right here. We have 1 there, and we have 1 there. So you just want to look out for that. Alright, and make sure that you set these screws away somewhere safe, that you're not going to lose them. Right, and now that we have those 2 screws out, we can come down here. Next, down here at the top of the console, you can see here is our game link. And we have this little ribbon cable. This is the LCD. We're just going to take these 2 rubber stoppers right here. We're just going to ever so carefully pull them out. Just like that. Now, just like we did with the iPod, we can very carefully just take this, lift up on this, roll it up, and very carefully just slide that cable out. Now we're going to go ahead and just pull these pads out, just so we don't start dropping them all over the place. And also, if you really want to get into your console and give it a deep cleaning, now is the time. And in this particular case, these actually stayed stuck to the PCB, so we don't want to drop those off, because these are the actual contacts. They contact here on the plating and complete the circuit. These are just like, they're kind of like keycaps. They just sit on the top, and you push them, and they push this rubber dome down, and it makes contact on those. It's the same way that a rubber dome keyboard works. Alright, so now here on the front of the device where the actual LCD is, we're going to be very careful. We're just going to reach down in between the plastic and the foam. We're going to try and work our way around and pry this screen out. Not everyone may be trying to preserve this LCD. I'm going to try to not break it, just because, you know, eventually we're going to get to a point in time where real GBA parts are going to start to become scarce. This is a deciding moment. You can put this replacement glass panel on the front of it, which is obviously much nicer, or you can leave, if you're okay with the way that this looks, you know, it's not too beat up. You can go ahead and leave this on here. You can tell, even though it's basically the same font, this one has this reflective coating in it, and this one is a little bit more subtle. So it's entirely up to you. I'm going to go ahead and replace it. In order to do that, we just need some kind of soft cloth. We're just going to go around here and just basically popping it out. As you can see, it's just held in with glue. There you go. Alright, so now is the time that we pull out our new LCD. First thing we got to do is, this will not fit into the Game Boy Advance housing. See, if you try to drop it in here, it doesn't fit. It doesn't sit flat, and if you look at the front of it, you can see it's tilted. So in order to fix that, we're actually going to have to cut this out, which kind of sucks. So what you're going to do is you're going to basically take note of where it's making contact, why it's not sitting flush, and you're going to cut away those parts with a Dremel or with an X-Acto knife. So we're going to have to, in my case, cut all of this out. We're going to have to cut this out too. So this is going to be quite time consuming. Alright, so this may not be perfect, but LCD seems to sit in there pretty flush now, so good. I did leave these little tabs intact down here at the bottoms. I didn't cut all of it out, I just left a little bit. So what I'm going to go ahead and do is I'm going to remove this protective film on the front of the LCD now. This is just to get rid of some of that slack in there. If you have a hot glue gun, that would probably work better, but we're not going to really rely on this for holding it in place as much as we are just temporarily holding it in place, because the actual pressure from the Game Boy Advance is what holds it in there in the first place. Alright, so the next thing we're going to have to do is we're going to have to short this pin here to this pin here using this included wire, and we're going to have to use a soldering iron for this. Now it's important to note that if you have the 32 pin, you do not have to solder this wire, but it is required for the 40 pin, like this unit here. Alright, so now with the adapter, we have this red wire. Since this is for the Game Boy Advance, it was never intended to have power for the screen. We have this wire that we have to place on the board. You can see we have these two transistors here. This one here is DA1 and this one's DA2, right next to C35 and next to this second largest capacitor. And we are going to put it on the top left pin of DA1. I went ahead and made a cheating piece of tape. And if you look carefully there, you can see that it is now the only fully exposed pin. My trick here is to just use a piece of tape, again, to hold the wire in place on the pin that I want to solder it to. This makes it easier because I don't have to worry about it moving. And that looks like I could have gotten a little close to the resistor, but it looks fine. I don't see any bridging. Okay, so I just went ahead and dropped this back in so I could place the batteries in here and did a temporary test hookup just to make sure everything works. Alright, so now it's time to attach the adapter to the LCD, placing it on there, and then pushing this black part down onto it to lock it. Of course, I forgot to put the buttons back on. Nice thing about Nintendo buttons is that it won't let you put them in wrong. We can plug the ribbon cable back in, and then we just push these little brown tabs down again. Alright, so I just like to point out, because I've been having some troubles getting this orientation right, so this should be with the gold labels facing the bottom of this connector. This should be with the gold contacts facing away from the board. Gold contacts facing the board, gold contacts facing away from the board. Red wire here likes to find its way into places that keep the system from closing up properly. We can then put the retaining screws for the board back in. As I could use my iFixit tool set, but I want to use these because this is what came with the kit. I feel like I'm cheating if I use the iFixit kit. Now we need to put in our 6 tri-wing screws. Make sure you tighten this one down nice and tight, because this is where your wrist strap is going to thread through. Before I wrap this video up, I just want to point out that I had about an hour to 2 hours diagnosing this thing off camera. The problem I was having is that it wasn't always detecting games, and even when it did, it would typically freeze after a couple minutes. After taking this thing apart and putting it back together about 6 times and checking all my soldering, I realized that some of the components on the logic board were shorting out on the back of the LCD, causing it to act weird. If you remember, the LCD that we took out had this foam padding on the back of it. Probably did quite a bit for insulating from the back of the metal screen, while as the display that we put in here did not have that. So what I ended up doing was actually putting a layer of electrical tape all the way across the back of the screen, and I haven't had any issues since I did that. But in the end, I'm very, very happy with this mod. It has really turned my GBA into a whole new experience. As you can see, the display between the AGS-101 screen and the standard SP screen is much, much better. It really breathes new life into some of these games. Guys, that's going to be it for this video. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you found it informative and you found out what you're getting yourself into when you're doing this mod. So that way, at least you guys aren't going into it blind. I'll go ahead and leave a link to the instructions that I followed down in the description. And until next time, thank you for watching.